This week, the question at the top of the leaderboard was this. Here we go, from Kaylee Sales. How is it right to have a lower minimum wage for young adults aged 18 to 21? Do we not do the same jobs and work the same hours? That's from Kaylee.
OK, so our question is, should the minimum wage have age bands then? Start with you, Leanne.
I think in principle that there should be a go-in rate for the job, and so there shouldn't be a differentiation on the grounds of age. And I also think that an important principle should be that if you work full-time, if you work a 40-hour week, that your income should be enough to live on.
So a living wage?
A living wage, yes. And at present, we've got too many people who are living below the living wage, which means that they work full-time and they struggle to make ends meet and often are reliant upon additional state benefits to top up their wage. So my party, Plaid Cymru, believes in a living wage. We believe that 260,000 people in Wales could be given a pay rise if a living wage was introduced tomorrow, and that if that were to happen, that it would save on the benefit bill, and it would also ensure that people who went out to work full-time brought home enough money to live on.
Is that a realistic model, do you think, Angela?
I think it's a fair point. Look, we've got to break the cycle of welfare dependency. We have to make it profitable for young people to go to work and not make it incentivise them by saying that it's cheaper to stay in bed. People want to work. There is a dignity in going to work. And obviously, it's the other problem about having an inequality in the pay band is it knuckles any other argument. It sets a very dangerous precedent, because how can you say in one breath, well, actually, young people should be paid slightly less for the same job, and then that knuckles all the arguments about men and women or able-bodied and disabled people. The fact is, if you do a job, I'd like to think if I did my job as well as you, or you did your job as well as the next person, that the job was done, then you should be paid for the job of work, not for who they are. If somebody is less experienced, they don't do as much work, they don't do the same amount of hours, OK. But we cannot have an argument about equality in any area of employment if we start with this, because, as I say, the precedent will be set and we can use that as almost like case law for anything else.
Gentleman here.
The panel have said today about bringing down the benefit bill, and that sort of concerns me a bit, because obviously there are people who are genuinely dependent on benefits. Obviously, as you said, that there are some people who sort of do abuse the system, but I know a lot of people who've left university, for example, genuinely can't find jobs, things like that. And it concerns me that this isn't just an issue in terms of employee pay. This is also an issue in terms of benefits. If you're 18, I think it's about £50 per week you get on job seekers allowance. It's not a lot, it's not a great deal. I know people who are genuinely financially struggling because, and if they were over 23, 24, 25, they would actually be entitled to 70 quid a week.
So there's age inequality in the benefits system as well.
Can I just make this point about the benefits, though, because it's so easy for politicians to attack people who claim benefits, and I am not one of those politicians, I can assure you of that. Make sense to pay people benefits because they're not earning enough in work. That money should be paid to them as a wage, and people who are working full-time should have no need of additional top-up benefits. But the people who rely on state benefits shouldn't be bashed in the way that politicians are all too happy to bash them.
Gentleman here.
Because Plaid Cymru is obviously part of the coalition in Wales, what are our AMs actually trying to do then to solve this problem? Because so far I've seen nothing, and I've been in many minimum wage jobs, and we're voting for people into Parliament. Good
question, Leanne.
Well, the first point is that Plaid Cymru isn't in coalition at the moment. We were up until 2011, but it's a Labour government in Wales now. And the second point is that our National Assembly for Wales doesn't have the power to set the rate for the minimum wage. My party, Plaid Cymru, wants to see the Assembly having powers over that and a range of other workers' rights issues. But at the moment, we don't have that power.
OK. Lady in the orange here at the front.
The majority of people who are claiming benefits at the moment are actually people who are pension age, and these people have already paid into the system and therefore are drawing out. Why have we still got politicians, though, who are still drawing a state pension when they've had, really good salaries throughout their lives? Why are we not giving that up from politicians and they're sacrificing that?
And I guess it's probably fair to say that politicians aren't the highest earning people in the country, so you would apply that equally to other high earners. Omar, what do you think about that?
Well, I just think if I can go back to the original question about young people being paid less, I think let's call it what it is. It's age discrimination. That's what it is. It's amazing that the debate has lasted, I know we're only getting started, right? But we've had a few minutes and no one has said, oh my God, what a monstrosity. How can the young people be paid less? How would we feel if it was anyone between the age of 60 and 63 was being paid less, or between 40 and 43 or something? We'd go, oh my God, that's mental. And I don't think young people particularly are of no value. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook because he's worth 20% less, his labour's worth 20% less than older people. So I think it's quite insulting, I think. And if we are going to have a minimum wage, I don't think young people particularly need to be told that they're not worthless. I think we all know that young people do a lot, right? But I think if we are going to have a minimum wage, it has to be one size fits all. It has to be fair.
OK. Yeah, gentleman here with the hair.
Going back to the question of politicians giving up their state pension, why should politicians who work equally as hard as any other person in society have to give up the pension that they earn through the work of their life?
Go on.
I don't think that they work equally as hard for a start, and for a second point, they get huge expense allowances and various other allowances that most normal people don't get.
Yeah, go on. Quite enjoying this for now.
How is that to say they're not worthy of their state pension, how come other people are more worthy of their state pension than politicians who do work equally as hard?
We pay the politicians, so our taxes are already going to pay the politicians. Why should we therefore then pay them a state benefit as well?
It is nice to think that Tony Blair's walking into a Swiss bank drawing a pension, isn't it?
I want to talk a bit about the cost to small businesses and businesses in general, though, if you did get rid of age bans. Anyone got any thoughts on that? Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to say, firstly, we were talking about young people, so I don't really think we should be discussing politicians. The next point is that people are looking for younger workers because they have to pay them less, which is keeping their profits higher. And I think the politicians are missing the trick, where if they took away that and young people were able to earn the same, they've got less responsibilities in general, they're able to spend more, they've got more free money, which will end up coming back into the tax bracket, and into the government to actually, use more for the NHS or to do other things. So young people shouldn't be treated any different. I agree, if they're doing the job, they need to be paid the same as an adult you were class doing it.
OK. Yeah, lady here.
Yeah, you said that, it could be damaging to small businesses who can pay younger people less.
I asked the question.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, you can be incentivising businesses to take on young people in other ways, particularly paid apprenticeship schemes. That's a massive thing that needs to be improved in Wales at the moment. At the moment, apprentices are paid next to nothing to do quite a lot of work, and they don't get any support in the same way that students do at college or university. So, again, there's a massive issue with businesses and young people and how they're employed. But the suggestion that they can suffer, well, that needs to be something that's addressed by government and politicians.
OK. Yeah, lady in the green.
In order to have the different age differences is the under 18s, it's to encourage them not to go to work and to stay in school. But once you're over 18, it's your decision to go to do full-time work. You might not want to do higher education. You might want to go get your 40-hour job, earn a living wage. But what's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old? I understand that a 16-year-old has many different needs to an 18-year-old, but once you're 18, you are an adult. You can do what you want and you should earn your wage.
Okay. Laura, youth unemployment is nearly 3 times higher than overall unemployment. So is it not reasonable then to have an incentive for employers to take on young people by having them paid less?
I think it's right that we should have incentives for employers to take on young people, given that statistic, but I don't see why that incentive should be at the cost of young people themselves. Surely there are other ways to incentivise taking on young people.
Like
if you look at the gap between 18-year-olds and 21-year-olds, it seems to me that this is specifically penalising young people who don't go to university, which seems really unfair. And I also think it's really important that we don't generalise. I mean, we did say that some young people have a greater kind of disposable income. Somebody says, they're more likely to be able to go and spend. But we've got to think also about the fact that there are young parents, and that this could be really penalising, especially young parents, young single mothers who are trying to support themselves, maybe trying to support children as well. And to be penalised just for their age seems completely unfair to me.
Yeah. Angela, how would you incentivise businesses to take on young people if you pay everyone the same?
Well, I think what the young lady up there said was absolutely right about this issue about apprenticeships. I think you need to look at your professional life as a kind of trajectory. You don't want it to flatline. You want to think, well, okay, I'm doing here and it's a bit rubbish and the pay's not great, but I don't want to look back in 3 years' time and still be here. I want to be going that way. So young people, yes, not everybody wants to go to university. Not everybody is capable academically. So they need a trade, they need a label, they need to find a purpose in life for which they will be amply rewarded. And the issue that we have with this age discrimination, which is, really hits the nail on the head, is we've not used the word exploit. There are always the risk that we exploit young people because by definition that if they're being paid less, then somehow they are worth less. So even though they're doing technically the same job, they might get the grubby end of that particular job. And we need to see people as being on a career path and on a journey so that they might be at the rubbish end of their CV, but one day they'll move on and they will feel right about doing it. And that's why apprenticeships or any kind of work structure which says, OK, do the rubbish now. I mean, we've probably all started doing a bit of photocopying and all the kind of office dog's body stuff, but this is a means to getting on to the next stage.
So structured progression
Structure is absolutely
what's required.
vital.
Tina, what's happening online?
Yeah, as you might have seen, that we've been running this question at the bottom of our screen. This, of course, is the power bar. Just use hashtag free speech yes or hashtag free speech no to give your view. We've had some answers already. I'll get to some of those, the online reaction. But as you can see, free speech yes. Is it right to have a low minimum wage for those aged 18 to 21? Only 17% of the online audience think yes. Interesting comments in contrast, though, have come in online already. This from Shauna. Most of the population at that age are still living with their parents, so don't need to bring in as much money because they don't have to pay the bills or buy their own food, etc. Loads of hands are going. Hang on a minute.
Just like a forest of hands immediately.
Shauna goes on to say, when I was 17, 18, I was working for £3.40 an hour and I survived fine. I don't know when she was working for that much.
Okay, 1950.
But anyway, hang on. And another one from Ross as well. We need a lower minimum wage all around, £6 an hour. How would you respond to those sorts of comments coming in? Yeah.
Well, I think the point about exploitation is a good one as well. And one of the strongest arguments I can think about against having different rates is that if you are an exploitative employer, then the easiest thing to do is to take on a young person because they're cheap. And as soon as they reach the age where the rate would go up, you sack them and you take on another person who is cheap. And I think that is something that we should be opposed to. So.
What about businesses, though, who say they can't create jobs if the wage goes up?
Well, I remember this debate back in the mid-90s when the minimum wage was first introduced. And I remember then that many businesses, and including the CBI at the time, said, business will be put out of business, they won't be able to afford to do this, and as far as I'm aware, that didn't actually happen. So I can understand their concerns, but I think that previous experiences would tell us that didn't materialise necessarily.
OK. A couple more quick comments. Your hand shot up.
When she was the girl on I'm assuming it's on, like, Twitter, Shauna, was saying, like, well, I lived at home and I survived on £3.20 or whatever it was.
40.
£3.40.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm 19 and living at home, and I have a job that doesn't pay much. But I'm supposed to be saving up for university and to go visit family and various other things that I would really like to be able to pay for, and especially university, because I don't particularly want to be taking out £9,000+ a year in loans, in student loans that I'll then have to pay back. And if I'm earning less than someone who's 21 or the regular minimum wage, then it just makes me more dependent on those student loans at a later date, and at the, I guess, mercy of my family and my parents who I'm living with.
Yeah,
because if they
looking for the generosity of your family, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, gentleman here.
So say we're talking about the minimum wage for 18 to 21-year-olds. So say if we were to raise this now, do you reckon that should affect the tax boundary? Because people earning under £8,000 a year, they get the personal allowance, don't they? So do you reckon we should lower the allowance as well if we are to increase the minimum wage?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be better off then, would you? You want to be better off, I would assume, from a measure that would equalise. So you can do different things with tax allowances, but I don't think it should be related to the rate of minimum wage.